Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons & Dragons and horror. Today we will explore the history of Paridon, the city that is the last remnant of a great civilization, strangled by the mist and struggling to survive. First, some brief clarifications. These videos and the next ones on Paridon are a partnership with my friend Jason from the Ravenlore channel. While my channel will do the traditional exploration of Paridon, revealing its history and secrets and its Dark Lord Soto, the Ravenlore channel will cover the macabre story of the Fang of Nosferatu, an evil artifact in the form of a dagger, which is intrinsically linked to the history of this domain and its mysterious killer, the Bloody Jack. If you are a fan of Ravenloft and still don't know the Ravenlore channel, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to the channel and check out his videos about the mysteries of Ravenloft. I will leave a link to the video about the Fang of Nosferatu and the channel in the video description. Before exploring the Zerishian cluster and the domain of Paridon, most of our exploration through the mist took place in the core of Ravenloft, and passed through domains that had already been covered in novels, adventures, and mainly in the Ravenloft Gazetteers, books that bring detailed information about the domains and their Dark Lords. I have always been careful to present Ravenloft in my videos, taking into account official sources. However, in the case of Paridon and other areas not previously covered by the Ravenloft Gazetteers, I intend to expand these sources of information. Paridon first appeared in the first box of the setting as the domain of Zerishian, encompassing not only the metropolis but the area that surrounded it. In the Grand Conjunction, the mists advanced over these lands, making the domain just its metropolis, surrounded by the mists, and integrating its underground areas into the domain of Tibor. The domain was further explored in the adventure Hour of the Knife, which later received an unofficial sequel on the Secret of the Carcatane website, called Shadow of the Knife, and received mentions in the Ravenloft's Red Box and in the book Domains of Dread. In the third edition, the book receives a mention in the main book, but the domain was not covered in one of the published gazetteers. The Ravenloft fan community wasn't going to let the set rot in oblivion. The Fraternity of Shadows website, the best known and most organized fan site in the setting, has published netbooks that continue the Gazetteer's proposal, exploring in depth the domains of dread. One such Gazetteer, published by the Fraternity of Shadows, addresses the Zerishian cluster. In the video description, I will leave the link where you can download this netbook. The next videos about Paridon will be based on the official material, the Shadow of the Knife adventure, and the Zerishian Gazetteer. Are you ready? After escaping the horrors of Timor, we finally emerge from the series to reach the busy streets of Paridon and search for a way to return to the core and resume our search for Dr. Rudolf von Richten. In this large metropolis surrounded by fog, few seem to care about our presence, and almost no one speaks our language. When we finally find a merchant who can understand us, he tells that if we want passage on a ship away from Paridon, we should look at the docks or the Colonial Merchant Company of Zerishian. We found the building of the Colonial Merchant Company of Zerishian, and there we discovered bureaucrats and employees versed in our language. Without a scheduled appointment, we are taken to a waiting room, an office in a library, to wait for a captain. While we wait, we discover in this collection a newly translated and printed tome in our language, telling the history of the nation of Zerishian and its tragic disappearance in the mists. Hour of the Raven. The city of Paridon has most of its population literate, and its university houses many scholars and experts with great erudition and knowledge. This might lead to the assumption that they have a vast and well-recorded history of the nation of Zerisha, but this is not the case. Even in this cultured and erudite city, part of its history has been lost forever. Although Paridon was the great capital of Zerisha, much of its historical documents and records of its history and of its great noble families were kept in states and castles outside the city that were swallowed with the advance of the mist that consumed this nation during the Grand Conjunction. Of the records that were in Paridon, much were lost in the Great Fire, and the city's humid climate also proved to be harmful to the conservation of books. Despite that, it is possible to find important documents and records that allow us to trace the history of the nation of Zerisha. The realm of Zerisha was unified under the crown of King Fëanor almost 1,000 years ago, putting an end to a cycle of wars between several rival fiefdoms. The consolidation of this reign took place with a marriage between two rival noble families, and King Fëanor married Queen Myrddin. The marriage soon bore fruit, with Lady Myrddin giving birth to the heir to the throne, Princess Parina. It was in honor of the birth of this child that the city of Paridon was named. King Fëanor died shortly after the birth of his daughter in a suspicious hunting accident. Although death, intrigue, and tragedy always haunted the royal family, the royal dynasty persevered, and the monarchy ruled uncontested for many centuries. This monarchical hegemony would come to an end in 546 of the Barovian calendar, when the city of Paridon suffered the Great Fire. The causes of this tragic incident remain a mystery, but sources attest that it originated in the docks, probably in oil, liquor, coal, and hemp sheds. After massive explosions, the fire spread to the city, and Paridon burned for 2 nights, until, with the help of a storm, the fire was put out. Most of the population managed to flee Paridon, but 4/5 of the city were destroyed by the flames or by the authorities in a desperate attempt to control the fire. The aftermath of the fire left the population of Paridon on the brink of revolt, and members of the aristocracy took advantage of the situation to further inflame the population. The monarch who occupied the throne at the time was Anne II, the Virgin Queen, a pious ruler devoted to the temple of divinity of mankind, and she began to suffer an incredible political pressure. After a period of fasting and praying in the temple, and without an heir to pass the crown to, she decided to abdicate the throne. Her last royal decree was to establish the parliament, and to order that her great palace, untouched by the flames, should be demolished, so that its bricks were used in rebuilding the city. To these days, the characteristic bricks can be found in the buildings and streets of Paridon. After this last act, Queen Anne II entered a monastery, where she lived in seclusion and was forgotten by history. The aristocracy began to share power through parliament, and confiscated the royal treasure in the name of rebuilding the city. Historical records from this period are quite scarce, as Paridon was rebuilt in the chaos of the dismantling of the monarchy. The Great Fire was not the only tragedy that befell Zerisha at the time, and scholars believe that the Great Fire of 546 is also the date that the nation of Zerisha was shrouded in mists and isolated from the rest of the known world. The great kingdom of Zerisha, which once expanded its influence over many distant lands, suddenly became isolated. Large merchant naval companies went bankrupt, with vessels and cargo considered lost forever on the high seas, and the kingdom, in addition to reorganizing itself politically, also began to face serious economic problems. Unequivocal proof of the integration of the nation of Zerisha into the Land of the Mists can be found in the records of the year of 1551, when the arrival of a Vistani caravan in Paridon is first recorded in accounts by merchants and law enforcement authorities. Shortly after Zerisha was swallowed by the mists, the city of Paridon began to suffer from Bloody Jack's terrible crimes. The first time his cycle of murders were recorded was in 586, when the mysterious killer killed 6 people over 6 nights. With each murder cycle, he changes the group of his victims, having already taken prostitutes, academics, and even members of the aristocracy as targets, always repeating his crime spree every 13-year period. The identity and longevity of this killer are the subject of great speculation in Paridon. Were these murders committed by a single assassin, or by an order of assassins? Could this be a bloodline of murderers, or some kind of immortal killer? Historians debate whether 586 was in fact the first cycle of murders by this mysterious killer. The social chaos following the deposition of the monarchy, Zerisha's adaptation to its new prison of the mists, and the reconstruction of Paridon could easily have hidden the actions of this assassin, and many believe that the first cycle of deaths date back to 547, just a year after the great fire that destroyed Paridon. These mysterious murders have haunted the city of Paridon and the kingdom of Zerisha for centuries, but their greatest tragedy to hit these lands will come in the year 740 of the Barovian calendar. The Grand Conjunction affected the entire land of the Mists, but Zerisha's domain was one of the most affected. The city of Paridon, drowned in a great fog, even denser than normal, which prevented visibility a few meters away. What at first was considered a simple bad weather soon became a concern when the mist remained firm over the city. To make matters worse, the city was also experiencing small tremors from earthquakes. When a new day came, with the same heavy fog and no more goods or travelers arriving in the city, fear began to spread. People started venturing into the mists in search of food and provisions, and soon panic set in among the population, with many turning to the Temple of Divine Form or the King's Quarter for protection or answers. Parliament declared a state of emergency and tried to calm and control the population, offering food and basic supplies, while at the same time increasing policing. Finally, after many days, the heavy fog dissipated, retreating to the city limits of Paridon. The entire nation of Zerisha had been swallowed by the mists, and only the capital Paridon remained, strangled by a wall of mists. Trauma and fear struck the population. 2/3 of all Zerishians disappeared forever into the mists, as did the access to the fertile fields that fed and provided for the city with food. Looting was common, and violence increased dramatically. Paridon's government also had to be changed hastily. Edward Cunningham, the Prime Minister of Zerisha, was out of town at the time and was one of those who disappeared in this tragic event. The Parliament rushed to reorganize itself, and after much intrigue and dispute among the aristocracy, the two houses of Parliament, once responsible for the nation and the city, were unified into a single parliament. From day to night, Zerisha was just Paridon, and lacked the resources to feed its population and the most basic needs. Ship captains ventured into the mists searching for mistways to try to restart trade with other lands. But even when a safe path was found, Paridon had very little to offer in the way of trade. Although the proud Paridoners do not admit it, many depended on the trade carried out by the Vistana caravans, which arrived in the isolated city in search of lucrative trade. Hunger ravaged the population, and under government orders almost all of Paridon's available land were transformed into plantation areas. During this disastrous period in the history, the population went through desperate measures. While the wealthiest enjoyed protection from the authorities and isolate themselves with the little they could save and obtain with their influence and power, the population was desperate and hungry. Almost all animals became food, and dogs, horses, cats, and even rats were hunted for nourishment. A series of suspicious deaths occurred among the elderly, disabled, and children, and suspicion of cannibalism spread throughout the city. The harsh winter that followed the Grand Conjunction was terribly cruel, and there was a large mortality. Books, furniture, and clothes were burned to fuel fireplaces, and the poorest population gathered in crowded shelters to try to survive. A climate of rebellion and mutiny was taking place in Paridon, with growing disputes between social classes. The aristocracy of Paridon was aware that the city was on the brink of revolution, and at first tried to contain these impulses with strict laws, increasing policing, curfews, and repression. The social tension only worsened when in 742 a new cycle of Bloodjack's murders began. Perhaps the Grand Conjunction affected the habits of this killer, who this time killed 11 people instead of his traditional 6 victims. A climate of paranoia set in the city when a group of foreign adventurers claimed to have proof that Paridon society was infested and secretly controlled by doppelgangers. These adventurers mysteriously disappeared following such revelations, but the impact of their accusations is felt to this day in Paridon society, which has a considerable fear of the doppelganger threat. A climate of instability caused many to call for revolution, but Paridon's aristocracy managed to maintain control of society. With the help of academics and experts from the University of Paridon, and the support of the growing bourgeoisie, economic and social plans were drawn to restore the normality of the city of Paridon and make it emerge from the chaos that threatened to disintegrate society. The city needed to reoccupy its public services, and Paridon needed to reinvent its economy. The Silent Revolution, as it became known, had its first act as a set of laws in 743, which prohibited child labor and determined that mandatory attendance of children for basic education. The poorest population revolted against these laws that kept their children away from the job market to help support their homes. But within a few years, these changes brought a change in social mentality and economic opportunities. Encouraging study and specialization proved to be the economic path for Paridon, and the inventions and technological advances unveiled by the University of Paridon have proven to be its main export commodity. Another major impact of this silent revolution came from the judiciary, when in 747 a series of decisions declared the Zerishians missing in the midst of the Grand Conjunction as dead, and their properties were legally redistributed into inheritance, or confiscated and appropriated by the state for social purpose. The following decade was marked by the resumption of economic growth, innovations, and stability, with food conditions re-established by imports, plantations, and livestock established in the city. In addition to the export of technological innovations, the captains of the Mists managed to make Paridon a crossroads of the Mists, and Paridon became a center of commerce, an intermediary between the core and other lands isolated from the mists, such as Rokushima Taiyo, Zerihaji, and Harakir. The conflict between the poorest class and the aristocracy seemed to have been pacified for now, with great help and support of the Temple of Divine Form. But a growing middle class has been competing for new spaces. Now, it is the middle class that is pressuring the aristocracy for greater participation in government and for an electoral reform. Although the paranoid population of Paridon fears doppelgangers infiltrating society, sinister rumors also mark the arrival of a new threat. The city's newspaper frequently reports strange disappearances and sightings of grotesque dark creatures emerging from the sewers. In 755, the last appearance of the infamous Bloody Jack was recorded, and once again 11 victims were murdered by his blade. No one yet knows the reason for the change in this pattern of murders, and everyone fears their arrival at 768 and the infamous killer's new cycle of death. For a long time, we wait in the library of this waiting room at the Colonial Merchant Company of Zerisha, busy with the history book in our hands. When night came, finally, one of the company captains came to welcome us and ask us to enter his office. The distinguished gentleman, Fawcett, knows our language and is interested to know how we got here and what we can contribute to his expedition if we were to join him. We begin trying to explain our situation. However, something unexpected happens. Through the window of his office, we watch in the cloudy sky of Paridon as the full moon emerges in the sky, and we are overcome by an agonizing pain. Our curse of lycanthropy consumes us, twisting our bodies into lupine beasts. Our last memory is Captain Fawcett's astonished face in despair, before we leap upon him with fangs and claws, before escaping into the streets of Paridon. We have few memories of this night of horror, but we woke up the next day in dark clothes and covered in blood. As we try to recover from what happened, we hear a commotion coming from the nearby street and the voices of an angry mob, as well as whistles from the guards. We try to escape the scene quickly and got lost in intricate alleys. We noticed a man gesturing at us, trying to get our attention, offering us shelter through a narrow door to an underground passage. Persecuted and cornered, we accept the offer of shelter. As we descend through a narrow stair, we fell into a trap and fall into a narrow cell with reinforced bars. From the top of the pit that opened beneath our feet, we heard a voice say, "A fitting fall for a band of murderers, but a major scoop for the disclosure. Get comfortable in your cell and let this chaos in the street pass. I will be back soon to interview you." After a while, we got used to the low light in our cell and the environment we could see through the bars. We are in some basement in what seems a clandestine newspaper office. The walls are covered with a map of the city full of pins, where several old newspaper articles are hung and scattered around the place. Without knowing the identity of our captor and without a way to escape our prison, we tried to unravel the mystery by reading these strange articles and conspiracy theories spread across the walls of the place. Join us, subscribe to this channel, and enable notifications, and let's reveal the secrets of Paridon.